Good afternoon, Austin. This is Troy Schlicker with the Austin Spotlight. I am joined today by my guest, George Vance McGee of the Austin Silent Market. How's it going, George?
Hey, okay, Troy. Beautiful weather today, and nice and crisp, and feeling well. So good one to be a part of.
Exactly. Yeah. After that freezing cold weather, just a little bit nicer, warmer weather, some sunshine feels good. Getting to Austin spring here in middle of February and stuff. So it's looking nice. Going to be hot weather before we know it.
It's inevitable. So yeah.
I still
Meteorologists
prefer
are.
it over the cold weather any day of the week. So
Oh, definitely. Yeah, very light
so
jacket ish.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. So you're again with the Austin Silent Market, which is a real estate brokerage here in Austin. So
Mm-hmm.
same field as I am, which is awesome to kind of get to chat and collaborate with someone else in
Mm-hmm.
the industry. I know there's, people sometimes kind of think that all realtors, are against each other. And in reality, we have to work with each other a whole lot more often
Mm-hmm.
uh, than the reverse. And so it's always good to get to know other realtors, kind of see their ideas and opinions on things. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. I'm glad to be on here, Troy. And you're right with the popularity of Texas and how strong the market is in Central Texas and beyond. Just this year alone, I've had clients out searching, beyond the Austin Board of Realtors limits. I joined the Houston Board of Realtors for a brief period of time and showed some property in the Montrose and the Heights neighborhood, and then I recently helped a client get a property under contract in San Antonio in the Southtown neighborhood, kind of just south of the downtown and the Alamo area. Um, just even though when you pass your test, your license is valid in the state of Texas. Our industry has some intricacies where, which board are you a member of, and there's almost kind of like congressional map type things, but
That's a good way to put it. I don't think I've heard it that
I
way. I like
mean,
that.
yeah, they overlap, and some are stronger than others, and the dues and the entries change between Sabor to Hill Country. So it can get a little convoluted. I mean, we kind of pre-discussed this a little bit. Was why doesn't the state of Texas just have one MLS? So if somebody's in Odessa and they want to buy something in Midland, or someone in Dallas wants to buy something in Austin, I mean, isn't technology about simplicity and helping clients and serving them? So that's just an
Yeah,
idea and a
I mean,
thought.
it obviously, it feels like there's the potential to go that way. I think most government and kind of regulatory things, which, the Board of Realtors really is kind of a regulatory association, always tend to kind of dig their heels in on some of those kind of changes a bit. Also, too, like say there's some people who, if they're not I'm sure that would increase charges overall, which some people would be like, oh, I don't want to sell homes or help people buy homes in these other areas. So, I mean, I'm sure there are some reasons against it. Some, I don't really sell all over the state, mainly because I don't know those other areas near as well. And so I like kind of staying a little bit more here in Austin just because I'm just the familiarity with the neighborhoods and
Mhm.
things that way. But yeah, no, I mean, again, there should be probably a little bit more flexibility of options to try to make it best for the client, which is one of if not the key tenet of being a realtor is you're supposed to do what's best for your client. So
Yeah, that's correct, because the forms are essentially the same. Like to use the TAR forms, Texas Association of Realtors. So essentially the same TAR rental application 4-page form would be the same in Austin as it would be in
yeah.
Cedar Creek or Bastrop or Suburbia or the country. Um, so there are some things that are similar throughout it. Um, but yeah, getting the whole state of realtors on one page, I can see how that would be an uphill battle.
Yeah. That's that's a hill I'm not really trying to climb though at this point. That's
Yeah.
trying to do a little too much.
Yeah.
So why don't you kind of give us a little bit of background of yourself? You're one of what I think a lot of people would uh, figure is a unicorn here as far as a actually native and multiple generation Austinite. So kind of give us maybe a little bit of your background and then how you kind of got into real estate.
Well, great question, Troy. I was born in 1981 to some awesome parents at Seton Hospital, which still exists. on 38th Street. And so I was a kid in the 80s, high school kid in the 90s, went to the University of Texas. There's my horns in the 2000s. Took a little sabbatical and lived in New York City for about 5 years and have come back. But that is correct. Us locals are called unicorns. There are, just as you're aware of, you work with them, I work them. They're around us all the time. Just a plethora and barrage of transplants. And no, they're not all just from California. My wife, I'm lucky enough to meet and have as my wife is from Missouri. So, Austin and Central Texas, we get transplants from everywhere. That New York, Florida, that like our weather, like our vibe, love the indie spirit of it, love kind of being the blue dot in the red state, having the sunny weather and having their what used to be their dollar go a little further for the pricing. But as we're seeing, the pricing for real estate is getting pretty high. But I have seen the changes of Austin going from the slacker Richard Linklater movie of the 90s, of people lounging around and not really doing much, seeing shows, to, man, if you're not working hard here, then I don't know how you're paying rents and bills, or if you've got a trust fund, can I be a part of it as well? But the culture has changed, and there are still some core elements, but we could talk about this for a while.
Yeah. No, it's like I say, there's obviously a lot more, native Austinites than you know or realize sometimes. But yeah, just like say the plethora of people that have moved to Austin in the last 10, 15, 20 years and are going to continue to move definitely makes the natives kind of a smaller percentage of the overall population. It's also kind of like, while California is has the largest percentage of in-state transfers, it still is really not. It doesn't even make up, I think, about 0.25% of all the in-state transfers. So you do get people from all over the country that move in, and then also a lot of Texans relocating within the state from San Antonio, Houston, Dallas as well too. So it's a pretty diverse mix of people from all around the state and the country.
Yeah, it used to be a little more small town-esque. You'd when you'd go to the Holiday House for burgers in Tarrytown, you'd know all the parents and dads and families there, and even if you went downtown, you might see your high school friends or your kind of immediate contemporaries, and you kind of knew more people. Whereas today in 2022, I'll do an entire loop around the hike and bike trail, past thousands of faces, and not recognize one person. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of fresh faces, which is totally cool. So people moving away, people coming in, and I believe our latest population we're definitely in the top 10, top 15 most populated places in the country, maybe top 12. I mean, fact check it if you like, but there are just a lot of people in Austin and Central Texas, and as it expands and continues to grow.
Yeah, I think it depends a little how you look at it, if it's just city size versus metropolitan area and some different things. But yeah, it's obviously up there, and of the large cities, also one of the fastest growing that way. So how did you get into real estate, or what made you decide to go into real estate?
Well, when I was a kid growing up, I loved sports and watching ESPN, and kind of wanted to be a sportscaster. I still love sports. And then in college, my grandfather was on the Supreme Court, and my uncle ran for state representative. So I kind of had a little bit of a politics bug, and thought that might be interesting. But I went to the Capitol one time as kind of an intern, taking notes on meetings, and I just kept falling asleep. And I was like, oh boy, okay, if you're not interested in something, this is not going to work. But my dad is the broker of Austin Silent Market, so it's kind of in my blood, if you will, like Archie Manning to Peyton Manning. They're both quarterbacks. You notice that, just like Goldie Hawn and Kate Hudson, they're kind of acting is in their family. So real estate is just kind of in my blood intrinsically. So one summer I went and sold Troy books door to door for a program called Southwestern, and that instilled in me wow, the sales skills, door knocking, not being afraid of rejection, using names, presentation, um, basically how to sell and have no salary and just be commission only. So I became confident in that role and public speaking, and I've been able to correlate just some of those sales skills to real estate, which is a sales business, um, and relationship building, and there's tons of different avenues to improve and get better at it. But uh, at the end of the day, we're progressive consultants and salesmen trying to help people and make things happen. As a realtor, you've got to kind of be somebody that wants to make things happen. If you're aloof and sit on the side and a little passive, it can be done. But despite what the Bravo TV tells you, we're just rich people drinking lattes and showing $1 million homes. You have got to be an out there, aggressive, you know, spinner to make things happen. So it takes some hunger to really thrive and make a living in our industry.
Yeah, I talk to people who either just have gotten into real estate or are thinking about it, and that's what I tell them too. Being a real estate agent has almost nothing to do with houses. It's all about the people, and can you find leads? Can you find people that need your services? Because unlike starting a lot of other small businesses, yes, you can go ask your family and friends, "Hey, do you need to buy or sell a home?" But they can't just say sure because they want to support your business. Like they have to actually need to buy or sell a home in order to do that. And then, as you mentioned too, and because it's such an easy industry to get licensed in, we have something like 12,000, I think it's probably more than that, licensed agents here in Austin. Everyone knows 5 or 10 real estate agents. So if you're just sitting back at home watching TV, hoping that someone's going to give you a call, well, they also could be calling a bunch of other people who are probably out being more active. So it's definitely, while it can be a really great industry to be in, it's definitely not as simple, you say, as TV shows may want it to portray it.
Yeah, it is not like Chip and Joanna Gaines just going in there with the fixer upper. So it is a real job and an entity. So it's not for everyone. It's experience helps a lot, and something bad will happen to you in your career as a realtor. But if you learn from it and just don't make the same mistake twice, then you end up usually being okay, because just like any industry, there will be waves of highs and lows of the $1 million sale, the helping the friend, and then you'll have deals where it just 3 days before closing it just flakes off, and something you worked on for 3 months and you were counting on that to pay your mortgage or your next grocery bill, and then you get $0. So learning to stay even keel, roll with it, uh, service minded, not too high, not too low, and just keep working. You usually something good will happen if you just keep working.
So you mentioned your dad's the broker of a company called Austin Silent Market.
Mhm.
So kind of to obviously tell us a little bit more about that and kind of the specialty there.
Well, the unique element of our brokerage, and each brokerage is different, and that's awesome. That's great. I'm glad people have different outlooks on it. There's no one specific way to do it. But for Austin Silent Market, in addition to providing and working active ABOR MLS services or MLS properties for sale and for lease, we also have what we call a silent market program, and that's for a niche of buyers and sellers who just for some reason or the other just they're not willing to go active on MLS. It's their decision. It's maybe they're getting a divorce, maybe they don't really want to sell, maybe they're testing a price, maybe one of their properties has an unpermitted garage and they don't want to alert code enforcement. Maybe they don't want their taxes to go up. Some people are particular about, I don't want photos of the inside of my home on all these Zillow and Redfin and third-party sites. I recently had a sale with an older couple, 65 plus, and it's possible they didn't want a lot of unknown strangers coming in, maybe passing COVID around, or just more cognitive of their health needs. So
Sure.
as you can see, there's a just a smorgasbord of reasons for each specific seller on why they wish to do that. And we kind of have a place for them here, and listen to them and just try and provide services to their unique situation.
Yeah. No, I mean, right, like and I'm sure for you guys as well, even focusing on it, my guess would be that the majority of the business that you guys do is still on market. I know that I don't necessarily focus, obviously don't have the silent market in my title necessarily, but you do what's best for the client, right? Like you say in this case, for the older couple, there, could be any
Mm-hmm.
number of reasons why not having
Mm-hmm.
the home on the public market makes sense for them.
Mm-hmm.
But that is generally the place where you're going to get the most views, the most traffic, and ultimately the highest price, which for most sellers is kind of the ultimate goal, is to really capitalize on that price. And so, but again, right, it's about doing, again, it goes back to the first thing we talked about, doing what's best for the client.
Yeah. And then on the flip side, buyers, George Vance. Well, you just reeled off the seller's reasoning. Why, as a buyer, would you want to purchase something off market? Well, if you purchase something off market, or are able to find something, usually there's less competition. And as we can see with some of the MLS properties, we're seeing these bidding wars just get a little too out of hand. I work with a good number of builders and investors who build spec properties and new development, and they love buying stuff off market because they don't like the sold prices disclosed in the MLS, or the taxes going up, or the new buyer reversing the price from the land to the new construction, and then finding out that way. So there's pros and cons for both sides, of the seller and the buyer as well, to do it. So it's often both of them kind of win. But like you said, Troy, it's just an additional kind of niche and channel, you know. Uh, so we happily work both. So shoot, if you want to invent a third way to do it, maybe we should. What's however we
Well,
can.
I'd say
You know,
the third way is kind of how most of the investment, or most of the true investment stuff's going on, and that's the investor themselves going on, knocking on doors, trying to find someone who
mhm.
hasn't quite made the decision to sell, but it was thinking about it, and just kind of giving them a cash offer. And so, a lot of times when I have clients that are
Oh
looking to
yeah,
do the investment, but they're not they're real estate investors. They want to buy properties for investment purposes, but that's not really their full time gig, and they wonder how other people are doing it. I'm like, they're literally going door to door to try to find that diamond in the rough. Like, if you let it hit the MLS, yes, investing in those properties is still going to be a good investment long term. Like, prices are not going down anytime soon. Even as crazy as last year was, we're still at a shortage of homes in the market. Interest rates are still super low,
yeah,
and more people are still coming from all around the country.
yeah.
But if you really, for the investor that's trying to flip a home, you really do almost, most of them are going out knocking on doors to try to find that, um, buy ugly houses, diamond in the rough that they can get and really update. And so those almost never make the MLS, and generally probably almost never make it to you guys to sell even on off market.
Yeah, I mean that's even more out there and aggressive, and if that works for them, getting out in front and finding it, and for the seller, sometimes these sellers, they just want to sell as is. They don't want to do improvements. They don't want a bunch of showings. They don't want the lockbox. They're just like, hey, if you can net me X from a sale, I'm happy. So whether there's commissions on it or not, um, that's serving the client, and hopefully the buyer gets what they want. So yeah, like we said, Troy, there's different ways to do it, and one's not necessarily better than the other. It's just figuring out a puzzle, and serving the clients and the people the best way we can.
So I know you're also an author. Can you tell us a little bit about I believe it's 3 different books that you've written?
Yeah, thanks for asking about that, Troy. It's really just a creative process. Real estate obviously pays the bills and keeps the light on for me. But, in my free time during the evenings while I'd be watching, late night TV or whatnot, I'd started blogging and journaling and writing all these entries. And I had three different blogs that created enough content to where I, hired a publisher, hired a creative person, and then turned them into books. So I used Lulu for one of my first books, Open Mindful Philosophy on the Fly, um, and then Create Space for Attractive Tales from Grand Cities, a social memoir. And my most recent book, The Nation We Live In, was also a blog as well. And all three of them are on shelves like $9 to $12 at Book People downtown on 6th and Lamar, which is the largest independent bookstore in Texas. And it's just a wonderful spot. They're nice to indie authors like me. And then I've got a note, May 28th and 29th, I'll be at the Lone Star Book Festival in Seguin. So
Okay.
if you're a book person and want to go on a day trip that weekend, the Lone Star Book Festival, May 28th and 29th, I'll be there in a tent just talking books and life. So
Very cool.
yeah.
Yeah, it's companies like Book People, which are like, it's kind of that mixed emotion as far as the progression that Austin's been on, which for the most part I like. And as a real estate agent, it's been beneficial to have, prices go up and more people looking to buy and sell homes. But also a little sad to see things, obviously Book People still going relatively strong, but you have different uh, Austin or Texas companies. It's just harder for small companies in general to kind of survive. And so, especially with COVID and a bunch of different things that have gone on, like you see all the development happen on South Lamar. And I've lived here for about 17 years now, and I can remember when South Lamar looked quite a bit different. And so there's some of the small things that you feel a little nostalgic for, but at the same point in time, things are always going to change and keep moving. And so it's always cool to see and be able to have the support of a Texas-based company like Book People for those books.
Yeah, the indie business aspect of Austin, I think, is one of the things that is makes our city so fantastic. It goes along with the moniker of Keep Austin Weird, which was big for a while, but is kind of losing a little bit. I mean, people might not remember that Whole Foods started on 9th and Lamar, where that Goodwill is, and just slowly got bigger and bigger. So it's not like Austin uh, doesn't want you to go corporate. It's just we like to encourage and support, our local people, our local businesses, our local brokers, mortgage lenders, just you name it, um, rather than the big massive chains. It's just knowing the business owner that maybe you've met their family, or they come to your kid's birthday party. It's more of a relationship building type thing than just going to the McDonald's or the Starbucks, where it's going to some big old corporate CEO. Um, so that is one thing that is cool about Central Austin and independent businesses. And when we lose them, it's tough because it's with prices, it's only likely they're coming back. So all I could say is, if you're a fan of indie businesses like that, Troy, then just patron them, support them, promote them, advocate them, thank them for working. And, you know, Jeff Bezos is rich enough on Amazon. So every now and then, just leave your house and go get your donuts in person or whatever. So,
I'd say that's the tricky part for some people, is having to, the convenience on top of price stuff, right? Like, where everyone's so price sensitive, especially with the way inflation stuff's been going. But then on top of it, just the convenience that a lot of the technology and bigger companies provide can make it hard to be like, oh, I should go to my local store or business to do that, but it requires me to get in the car and go out on a cold day or something like that, versus click a button and have it taken care of.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's the soul of really, Central Austin and Austin as well, is the unique music venues, uh, Continental Club, Red River, East 6th Street. I went to Hotel Vegas last week. Is the keeping those live music venues alive, and then also the indie businesses like the suit peddler, book people, or just something. Maybe it's your neighborhood bar or restaurant, and you just go down there and for happy hour. But if we keep the money within the people we know, it'll just help the economy rather than it flowing away back to the big CEO bucks. So
Yeah.
uh, anyway, I think that makes things more interesting.
What do you see ahead for Austin in the real estate space over the next, over this summer, and then kind of, the rest of 2022?
Great question, Troy. Your podcast is called Austin Spotlight, and I remember one of the first silent market homes I sold was in this neighborhood called Allendale, which most people would think of, oh man, that's Central Austin, George. Well, when I was talking to some neighbors around there, they're like, well, George, back in the day, man, Allendale was out there. There were no roads. That was way north. Same thing with stuff like Rollingwood. Oh, well, that was the country, and oh, if you
Yeah.
wanted to go to that music venue, you had to go down this dirt, windy road and whatnot. So uh, I think Austin will just continue to expand and grow. Not, I mean, it's possible that Dallas and Fort Worth, that whole metroplex of urban sprawl, might happen between us and say San Antonio, with Kyle, Buda, New Braunfels, San Marcos, San Antonio. So if you can get to San Antonio in an hour, I mean that's a decent commute for any kind of grown up. So it's possible that things will just continue to spread out because unfortunately we still just have not passed a new zoning ordinance. Troy, the city hasn't. Code Next failed, and we still have the same zoning rules probably as since the 90s. So we're not moving towards the pro density type
Mhm.
type type things, which I personally think we should. I'm not saying we have to go to Houston's no zoning rule and just throw it all down the trash, but
Yeah.
I think we do need to encourage some more density in the city of Austin to keep more people living here, have more affordable price points, let different types of families, live in Austin. It shouldn't all just be single family homes that are $3 and $4 million. So if we can vary our price points, vary our size of product we can sell, we'll have a more diverse, welcoming city and more inhabitants, which should make it more lively and prosper. Um, so we could use an uptick on the zoning and density, and if not, it'll kind of
Continue to spread. Yeah, like I
it'll
say,
keep
it's
sprawling.
unfortunately consensus in almost anything seems like it's been pretty challenging to come by, but it's kind of what's needed in order to make that shift. The other thing too with Texas specifically compared to, say, obviously you lived in New York for a while, and a lot of these people moving from California, is we do at least still have the land, right? Like there's people that, going out, if you live out in Butte or Kyle, I mean, yes, most people don't necessarily want the commute, but if you were used to having to take change two trains in Brooklyn and Manhattan, or if you're used to having to drive in LA traffic, a 40-minute drive from Butte doesn't seem that bad. And then there's so much land and more affordable pricing out that way that
Mm-hmm.
uh, it makes it challenging to, buy one of the downtown condos, which you get almost no square footage and it's a more expensive price because there just really aren't that many of them, even though it seems like a bunch of them have gone up in the last 5 to 6 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, Troy, you mentioned that my practice is all over, but mainly kind of Central Texas. Would you describe maybe the difference that you see in kind of that 620 Lakeway, suburbia, Liberty Hill vibe, sentiment, lifestyle versus Austin? Do you see people that just
Yeah,
prefer that, or how would you describe
I,
the differences between the city life and the almost outskirts city life?
I think so. I think there's kind of two sides to it. I mean, one, kind of that 620 corridor, so Lakeway, even now almost kind of Dripping Springs, up through Cedar Park and Leander, they generally have pretty good schools. So that's always been a big draw, I think, for a lot of young families or a little bit older families, is having good schools that their kids can go to with sports that way, and then more affordable, right? Like everyone would, a lot of people contact me saying, "Oh, I'd love to get into Eanes," but when your 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom teardown house is at $1 million, that eliminates a lot of people right off the bat. So then going a little bit further west for still really good schools but more affordable housing, it's been interesting. Obviously, the start with the Domain has kind of created almost a secondary hub, so that if you want to live, say, in Cedar Park, you can still do a lot of the stuff that you would have done downtown, but now in the Domain, so that have their kind of version of 6th Street, where you can go through, you can kind of walk to a bunch of different bars and do some different things that way. And it's just a little bit, obviously you don't have the college kids going there quite as much. It's a little bit more of older adults, young professionals. And the success of the Domain has plans for similar projects, not quite to that scale, in a lot of other parts of Austin as well. So Cedar Park and Leander are both kind of creating similar projects. There's one out towards Hutto that's supposed to come on. And so I feel like that, again, unfortunately, that's going to kind of continue with that sprawl, but there's also enough people moving to Austin that if we got more stuff built in the city, that would those housing units wouldn't go to waste either. The interesting thing that I'm curious about with some of those areas, like even Allendale, is if they'll start to turn into California, in the sense that we're already seeing a little bit where an older single family home gets bought up, and now you're seeing A and B units or 2 units go into those properties to kind of increase density and stuff that way, because people still do like being close to downtown Austin for a lot of different reasons. You don't have to fight as much traffic if you need to go or work down there. There's obviously just more centrally located, depending on if you want to get to Austin FC soccer game, or if you want to go downtown for something. So there's there's almost nothing that, if developers, the city, even individual kind of contractors want to build, that people, I don't think, wouldn't be afraid to use that way. The only other thing that I feel like that had maybe slowed some of the downtown stuff a little bit, again with COVID, is that a lot of people moving from outside other areas wanted the extra space, and so they're willing to make that farther commute to have a little bit more yard, a little bit bigger home for that same price point, rather than being in a smaller home a little bit more centrally located.
Yeah, I met a guy at coffee that worked for CoStar, which is like the biggest commercial type of MLS nationwide, and he said 2021 was the best year for rural land they've ever had. And so you're right, the pandemic, especially during the height of it, it forced people out of the city. It made downtown almost not appealing, especially when Austin had those homeless problems. But they've since, ratified that by the public. Hey, thanks for voting for that. Awesome. Our streets are much cleaner. But yeah, rural America became hip and cool again. Fresh air was, on the checklist. It'll be interesting to see, though, Troy, now with, knock on wood, the pandemic kind of lightening up a little bit. People being vaccinated, double vaccinated, boosted, so, immunity, those type of things. If the desire to live downtown or live in the city comes back, or not at all,
Yeah.
But I think the balance maybe that the pandemic brought to, the desire for rural area, suburbia, Austin, city living, is welcomed. It's nice to have, people wanting different desires and having different options for city living, suburbia, small towns. So in that essence, for real estate, it added a new, I think, kind of welcome wrinkle to to our jobs and helped areas that kind of needed it.
Yeah. No, I've said a lot that we were fortunate that this all happened when it did, right? The fact that we could work remotely, whereas 20, 30 years ago, that would have been very challenging. The fact that you can still have, while having video chats with friends and family is not the same as being in person, it's still a lot better than not being able to talk to them because you have to pay long distance charges on a phone bill or something like that. And so, yeah, I think, like I say, we were always, technology was always kind of leading us down this road where more remote work was going to happen. Um, again, right, there's no reason to go to the movies when you can get, stuff's just coming out on Apple Plus or HBO Max or all those different types of things as well. And so you can get so much entertainment and do so many of those things at home. But at the same point in time, humans are social creatures, and so there's always going to be at least some pull to want to do stuff together,
Mm,
even if it's in smaller knit communities. And maybe you're the type of person who used to go to ACL and that's just not something you want to do down the road. But
hmm
I think there's a lot of, but again, with how well attended those types of things have been uh, this past year, there's definitely proof that people do enjoy doing those things and being social and hanging out with other people. So again, it may the pandemic may have actually helped Austin in some of their issues like traffic, like you say, like not like some of the density issues about allowing people to move further away from the core and still work for jobs that are in those areas to keep employment up and stuff. So um, you always just got to be on your toes and ready for change because that's about the only certainty in life is change.
hmm Troy, curiously, what is your take on kind of the Airbnb and the vacation rental market? Do you see much of that out there versus traditional leasing? I live in Travis Heights and SoCo, and there's a lease listing where I guess the vacation rentals are allowed for 31 days. And this listing agent said, "Oh yeah, well George, we get people working remotely, we furnish it, and we charge them, 5 to 7 thousand a month just for these vacation rentals." Now, I don't think the state has passed any sort of, statewide ordinance allowing them or disallowing them. It seems like it's still a city jurisdiction, and some small
Mhm.
towns are in favor of them, and some aren't. I talked to a broker agent, in Fredericksburg and Hill Country, and she said they're kind of trying to crack down on them and limit them a little bit. But what is your take on, should homeowners and vacation rentals and that type of real estate?
Yeah, no, I mean I get that actually a lot from clients and kind of clients looking to invest in properties as well, right? Austin specifically, Lakeway, a lot of the cities have cracked down on the short term, so the stuff under 30 days, and making it harder to do that, right? You're supposed to get a permit from the city of Austin or Lakeway or Cedar Park, Round Rock, these types of areas to be able to rent out a property short term. Obviously, some people decide to do it without that, but that has kind of cracked down on that. But we say because of the work remote, you are seeing people do longer stays because they can. I know a few different people who they were just renting, I think, in New York City actually, and now they every month or so, every month or 2 months, they just move to a different Airbnb throughout the country so they can just go kind of visit and live in different areas. So
Yeah.
it's definitely something that's happened. I know I kind of found one guy who has like 25 different Airbnbs, not here locally in Austin, but I mean it's definitely still super popular for people. There's
hmm
actually on Rainy Street, it's called Nativo, which is a condominium complex that actually allows Airbnb, because that's one of the tricky things
What?
with condominiums
Yeah.
is, there's usually potentially state restrictions, city restrictions, but then anytime you have an HOA, which a lot of Texas properties do and all condos do, they a lot of times will have even stricter
hmm
rules or something like that. But this building was designed specifically for the units to be allowed to be short-term rentals, and so I'm sure that they're just killing it because there aren't a lot of other options like that in Austin. But yeah, so most of out here, it's kind of going to be the same as Austin. Yeah, in general, a lot of if you're in the jurisdiction of the cities, most of them will have rules or require permitting to do under 30 days. But yeah, that 31-day lease is kind of that sweet spot potentially, if you can find people obviously that are looking to stay, can stay longer, want to work, want to kind of test Austin out potentially to see if it's a place they want to relocate to. And so I don't necessarily, I don't see that changing. I've also was able to speak to someone about, because a lot of companies are working remotely, there's actually a bit of a need for almost like an Airbnb for corporations, where they can actually do single day or multi-day retreats for their company. Because if almost everyone's here in Austin, but they all work remotely, like every quarter they may want to meet somewhere and do have a Friday where they do a group project, they all actually do something in person
Mm-hmm.
that day. But obviously those types of properties are going to look a lot different than a typical residential property is going to look. But most commercial space isn't designed for that either. So there's kind of a hybrid opportunity there as well too. So I think it's one of those that if you can think of a use for property, there is that opportunity out there. Obviously, some of those opportunities are more obvious than others. Buying a home to live in it, that's a pretty obvious opportunity. But there really are numerous different ways that people are using real estate, and kind of that fluidity with where you live and how you live and work.
Well, it's definitely easier to just do the traditional lease where the tenants pay all the bills and they're kind of in control of it. Because I've had clients go back and forth between doing
Mhm.
the short term versus the traditional, and there's pros and cons for each. The short term is, especially if they're trying to manage it themselves, is a job, and never really
Mhm.
know what kind of guest you're going to get. But yeah, trying to maximize their real estate. That's one of our kind of duties is, hey, what's the highest and best use for this property? And whether that's building new, doing an addition, tearing it down, renting it out, attempting to change the zoning. That's always a good way for us and as agents to look at something like that, and then present those to our clients. They may not have any interest in doing it. They may just say, George, I just want a primary home, and this is just what I want. But um, I don't want to say enlightening them, but letting them know, hey, here are some things you could do to this property. Oh, hey, here are the deed restrictions. This is unlikely to happen. But people forget that they think they just buy a house and close and it's that simple. But there's a lot of underlying things, Troy, that we as realtors, brokers, and other good agents and brokers provide information to clients so that they can make educated choices. So
Mhm.
deed restrictions, getting inspections. You talked about appraisals, zoning. What's allowed there. So there's plenty of work to be done uh, in our job. So it is a real job and a real entity, and we're providing service to people. So hopefully they'll work with us. That's
It's no, I mean, it's actually one of the reasons I love the job is that there's no 2 days that are alike, right? There's no two clients, there's no two properties that are the same. And granted, every once in a while, it's kind of like, it'd be really easy if you could just, rubber stamp something because it was the same. But most of the time, it's actually really exciting that things aren't the same, and that
uh-huh.
you get, every day is going to be a little bit different. The kind of, as you were talking, the other pet peeve I have with real estate agents in general is that too often they see what they would want to do instead of understanding what the client's trying to do. Now, again, it could be something where you need to educate a client that there's this other option that they don't know about that could be the right fit for them. But a lot
Mm-hmm.
of times I'll talk to a client. Oh, I was working with somebody else, but they kept showing me homes that I wasn't interested in because it was a home that the realtor was interested in or thought was a nice home, but it didn't fit what
Mm-hmm.
they wanted from a home. And so I tell them I've sold a lot of homes that are homes I never personally would have bought because they wouldn't have been the right home for me, but they were the right home for the client, and that's kind of that key factor.
Yeah, as agents and we're educating them as to kind of what possibly can or can't be done or things about it, as long as we're helping them make informed decisions, uh, then let them do their thing. Uh, I was saying that yesterday or on Saturday at just one of my friends' places. They were like, "Oh, George, what are you working on?" I said, "Oh, well, I'm looking for this buyer. He's looking for a compound for 3.5 million to do his thing, and this other buyer wants a 4 bedroom in the west area to do their thing." And so just help people do their thing,
Yeah, there you go.
but
Very nice.
in an educated
Yeah,
way, so that uh, they don't get any pratfalls, down
yeah.
the line. Like some people that, I think I heard of one horror story where an investor bought a lot in East Austin and then went to go demo it, and then they couldn't get the demo permit because it was historic and there was a historic person, and oh boy, so then they're like, oh, well, I just paid 450,000 for something I can't tear down. I thought I was going to tear it down. Oh,
Yeah.
what do I do now? But they didn't do their research. They didn't have a buyer's agent run it past them. They didn't research that during their option period, and they stepped in it. So
Very, very much so. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I'm
and
sure we could talk about.
yeah.
I'm sure we could talk about real estate stuff all day long. But for people that may want to reach out to talk to you more or find out more about you, what's kind of the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, George Vance McGee, local real estate broker with the off-site market. My phone number is 512-657-9281, and George Vance with a V at gmail.com. I check email often and phone. And then also, if you feel like reading a book, go down to Book People and check out my 3 books on shelves there as well. So um, those are the best ways, Troy.
Awesome. Well, again, it was great chatting with you, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
All right, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Okay.